And from Northern Ireland, where politics and religion, law and morality go hand in hand, we ask whether justice is being done in cases of rape. When a psychopath or dangerous schizophrenic is released into the community, who takes responsibility? For the first time in the UK, a health authority is now being taken to court for negligence by a woman whose daughter was murdered by a psychiatric patient. If she wins, it'll mean a complete rethink of the way we deal with the mentally ill. Julie Hall went to Hartlepool to meet her.
You used to come down here with Rosie?
Yes, and particularly on the other side where the block stands there, where the paddling pool is.
Beverly Palmer's daughter was murdered 3 years ago by a man with a history of psychiatric illness who had recently been housed just 50 yards from where they lived. Rosie was 3 years old when she was killed. Her mother, then working nights as a midwife, was asleep the afternoon Rosie was abducted. When Beverly's partner woke her, worried Rosie was missing, she feared the worst.
John woke me up and said, Rose is missing, and immediately I knew something had happened.
Now, what did you then do?
Oh, it state of panic. The police came. The whole of the neighbourhood was out searching for Rose. Taxi firms came off voluntarily off their shift to search for Rose all over the headlands and all over the town.
Sean Armstrong sexually abused and murdered Rosie about an hour after abducting her. He hid her body in a bin liner in his flat. Beverly believes Rosie should be alive today and that Sean Armstrong should never have been released from Hartlepool General Hospital's psychiatric wards. We now know that police were aware of allegations of sexual offences against Armstrong, including one concerning a 2-year-old child. That a senior social worker warned that he was likely to be a risk to any child he comes into contact with, and that during his last admission to Hartlepool General Hospital in 1993, he made a statement to a student nurse that he had sexual feelings towards children and that when he was discharged from hospital, a child would be murdered.
There was so much history of the man that they failed to recognise that this man was a potential risk. He'd already been identified by a senior social worker 15 months previously as a serious risk to children.
But the problem with Armstrong's history was that doctors and other medical staff knew some information, whilst police and probation and social services knew other facts. But they never, partly because of patient confidentiality, ever put the whole profile of Armstrong together. Beverly believes this was negligent, and if they had, they would not have risked housing him with no regular supervision or treatment in her neighbourhood.
This is where you used to live?
Yes. Yes.
And this is where Rosie lived with you?
Yes.
And
yes.
where was it that she went to play?
I'll show you. Well, she used to play on the green with the kids here, and it was into this courtyard which we're approaching now, where Mrs. Fox was planning the picnic for the children.
So this was where she was going to have a picnic that day?
Yeah. His flat has since been demolished.
Well, Armstrong used to live there?
Above this, he had a flat in there, and it was demolished.
From the flat, Armstrong could watch the children on the small green where they played.
Now, I looked upon this area as an extension of our own front garden. I felt it was such a safe area.
What do you feel when you stand here, an area that has lots of young children in it, that the authorities could actually house him here?
They have absolute contempt for people.
But do you think it could be difficult for housing authorities, police, social services, all coming across this individual in different ways over the years, but pretty difficult for them to coordinate?
Oh, how so? What a shame why they're getting paid 30 grand a year then. Why was Armstrong moved here? Why was he moved out of a bedsit? He had property, he had no priority. This wasn't a priority area, yet he was moved in as a priority. He had no children.
Whilst the authorities only had sporadic dealings with Armstrong when there was a problem, his new neighbours living by him daily were quickly suspicious of him and immediately told police where to look when Rosie went missing.
Were you living locally here at the time?
Yeah, he was just on the corner. Yeah.
Rosie was missing on the Thursday night and we stayed here because he was in the flat and we watched him all night. We even stopped the police.
And told them to go in.
Yeah. Go in.
That's right.
And they just said, we can't do it, we haven't got any proof.
Nip round the front.
If the police had been privy to Armstrong's full medical history, they may have searched more thoroughly sooner. Beverley believes Tees Health Authority and Hartlepool and East Durham NHS Trust were negligent and is suing them in what is believed to be the first negligence case against a health authority for releasing a psychiatric patient who later committed a murder. Beverley's solicitors argue that the authorities failed to properly diagnose and treat Armstrong, failed to properly assess the risk of Armstrong abducting, abusing and murdering a child, and failed to ensure that he was not discharged into the community whilst at risk of committing such offences. An inquiry into Armstrong's case found failures by the hospital and psychiatrists, but concluded they could not have anticipated the risk. Beverley now wants a judge to decide that. The next time Beverley Palmer takes this walk to the High Court, it will be for the hearing, which she hopes will help ensure a legal duty of care is imposed on health authorities, making them liable if they are found to be negligent.
I'm doing this for my daughter Rose. I don't want any mother to go through the pain that we've gone through. The ramifications in our family will go on for generations. I am no longer a mother to my other child. I'm only half a mother. And part of me died when Rose died, and the circumstances in which she died, I want to see that there is a statutory duty of care enforced in this country. It is essential that society is protected. I'm going to have my day in that court because I want the authorities to be held accountable for predictable murders and for it to stop.
This week, the Rose Palmer Foundation, set up in Rose's memory, found a loophole in the government's new paedophile register, which means child killers, like Sean Armstrong, can avoid having to log their names and addresses with police if and when they're released. If you need information about mental illness and the Mental Health Act, details are in UK Law's fact sheet.
Have you ever written something, or taken a photograph, or shot your own video, and wondered what rights you have to prevent anyone else from copying or using it? Or perhaps you're the one doing the copying, a library book, a magazine article, taping a CD, or recording that film off the telly. Is it legal? What is the law on copyright? The basic principle of copyright is simple. It's the right to stop somebody else copying your work. That can be original literary works, dramatic, musical and artistic works, sound recordings, films, broadcasts and cable programs. And it lasts for quite some time. Copyright remains for the lifetime of the author and then for another 70 years after that. So how do you register your copyright? Well, the fact is you don't have to. It happens automatically whenever you complete a work. The moment you lift your pen from the paper or take a photograph, the copyright is yours, and you can then prevent somebody else copying your work, or indeed charge them for doing so. Because of this, almost all of us own copyright material. By the same token, we also violate other people's copyright. Have you ever photocopied something, or taped a cassette or CD? Music copyright is often broken. You could be sued or charged a fee for making a recording of someone else's work, like taping a radio program or a friend's CD at home, or for playing recorded music in your shop or business premises. If you do, you should in fact pay a fee to one of the collecting societies that protect the interests of copyright holders. If you want to protect your copyright, you may have to prove when you created the work. So one good idea is to make a copy of the work and post it to yourself by recorded delivery. When the envelope returns, keep it safe and unopened, just in case. If you'd like more information about protecting your rights or avoiding the problem of infringing the copyright of others, call the phone number shown at the end of the program. It's thousands of people's private fantasy. They spend hours searching the countryside when at last they find it. Buried treasure. Each year, 2 million archaeological finds are uncovered in the UK, but whether the finder inherits a fortune has depended on a law going back to the Middle Ages. Not anymore. Here's Claire Kavanagh.
There are about half a p. That's the first coin of the day.
2 weeks ago, Bert Douch and Phil Collins went metal detecting in East Sussex and found more than just a Victorian halfpenny.
Well, it was Friday, the 8th of August, that we went to our favourite farm, and we started to walk across the field. I said, I'm going to go across to the shade. I received a signal, and when I dug it up, it was 2 hammer coins in one hole. I fell over, and we've done this small area, and by late evening, we finished up with 28 coins and 1 cut half. We went home, Phil got the book out before I did, and he rang down and he said, they're Edward the Confessor, 1042 to 1066. And I knew straight away that we was on to something extremely valuable. Well, the next day, we all went, including the farmer's wife, and at the end of that day, we finished up with 374.
What did you feel when you actually discovered these coins?
Well, it's unbelievable. You go on to cloud 9, you only ever see these coins in the books.
It's a find of a lifetime and one of the best Saxon coin discoveries this century. It's thought to be worth around £750,000. The coins have now gone to the British Museum. Whether Brett and Phil profit from their discovery depends on the ancient treasure trove law. If it can be proved that the hoard was deliberately buried at the time, then they'll profit. If the coins were simply lost, then they won't. This bizarre test is carried out by a coroner using expert advice and a jury, but all that's about to change.
Under the past treasure trove law, an object had to be buried with the intention of recovery to become a treasure trove. And this led to a whole sort of absurd circumstances where we would have to stand up in court and argue whether, I don't know, a Celtic chieftain in 100 BC ever intended to recover a piece of gold which has been found today. Now, under the new Act, that will all change, and we won't have to try and second-guess people's intentions of thousands of years ago.
The second change in the law is the definition of treasure that belongs to the state. Anything over 300 years old will come under the Act, and it's not just gold and silver that will have to be declared, so museums are expecting to see more treasures coming their way.
Well, this is a new gallery about the history of money from the beginnings until today. Well, the new legislation about treasure will enable us to acquire many more new finds, which we'll be able to put in galleries like this for people to look at, enjoy, and generally help them to understand about our past in ways that really weren't possible before.
And what would you find in a gallery like this, following the new legislation as opposed to the old treasure trove?
Well, you would continue to find hoards of coins, such as some of the ones on display here, but you would also find important single objects, for example, single items of jewellery, which previously wouldn't have been treasure trove, but would now. Up here we have a hoard of Roman gold coins from the 2nd century AD that was recently found in Oxfordshire. It's one of the most important hoards to have been found from Roman Britain. There's only 3 or 4 like it known.
But not everyone agrees that museums will get more, because a third and more controversial change in the law means that anyone who fails to declare precious finds within 14 days is liable for a fine and even a jail sentence. And it's not just users of metal detectors who should worry.
Well, it affects everybody. Even if you found a gold ring in your garden, then you'd have to declare it within 14 days. Otherwise, you could face a penalty of £5,000. Plus, if it's over 300 years old, it's no longer your property. It belongs to the state. It's been nationalised.
So treasure hunters say heavy penalties could deter people from handing over finds to the state.
If you want to have cooperation, then you have to encourage people to declare and encourage them to go out and find, which this Act doesn't do. In fact, detector sales have dropped dramatically. Other people are frightened that their collections will be taken and confiscated. And I think it's been very depressing for everybody concerned.
There are over 20,000 metal detectorists in the UK, and most don't make spectacular finds. But many are worried that they might fall foul of the new law if they don't report items to their local coroner.
I found a whole range of things from coins, buckles, many day-to-day things such as parts of pipes, bits of pottery, lots of things that would be regarded as rubbish to perhaps museums. It's going to overwhelm the coroners with the amount of work, the amount of letters they're going to have to write to us as metal detectorists, and that could be very difficult. It could open up a whole minefield of problems.
So, under the new Treasure Act, which comes in on September the 24th, any object that contains more than 10% of gold or silver and is more than 300 years old is classified as treasure and belongs to the state. If you do find something you believe is valuable, report it to the coroner. If it's classified as treasure, a museum has the right to buy it and must pay you the full market price. If the museum rejects your find, you're entitled to keep it. If you want more information about treasure hunting, call the phone number shown at the end of the programme. The coins have been declared treasure trove, so Phil and Bert will profit from their haul.
In the early 80s, the conviction rate for people accused of rape was 1 in 3. Today, it's 1 in 10. The Home Office is now in the middle of a study looking at the whole way the courts deal with rape, including looking at an idea to create a lesser crime for so-called date rape. So the big question is this: would it be better to give the courts more flexibility in dealing with allegations of sex without consent, or is rape always rape? Jill Sayward, who was the victim of a violent rape in her father's vicarage in Ealing in 1986, suggests that a less serious offence of rape without violence would lead to more successful prosecutions.
The more I've kind of looked into it and sort of understood what's going on in various rapes, the more I feel that there needs to be this difference between the unclear act that went ahead and she didn't like it or she didn't want it to happen, and the premeditated, very vicious assault.
Louise, who's 17, was raped by a friend, but her case never got to court because the Director of Public Prosecutions decided there was insufficient evidence. We brought Louise together with 4 other people from Belfast who deal with the problem of rape or have strong views on whether or not the laws on rape should be changed.
Rape is rape. It's as simple as that.
So when people talk about date rape, that's exactly the same crime as any other kind of rape?
Yeah, it should all be treated the same. There's no difference between it. They should all be given the same sentence.
Should all get the same? One of the most controversial points raised in rape cases is that of mitigating circumstances. For instance, should the courts take into account the way a woman dresses?
We get this in the courts all the time, where the defendant's barrister will talk about the length of the woman's skirt or how much she had to drink, and those things unfortunately are taken into consideration.
And you don't think they should be?
Of course they shouldn't be.
Well, Eileen, could I ask you?
Of course they shouldn't be. What damn difference does it make what length of skirt someone has on? We have had calls to our centre about a baby of 6 months raped and an old woman of 86. Are you going to tell me its baby grow was too tight?
But it's relevant to the legal issue, Eileen, and the legal issue is consent. I'm sorry.
But what has that got to do with the length of a woman's skirt? Or how much she's had to drink?
But if you think it out, it will relate to that legal issue, and that legal issue is clear. Consent, and in the circumstances of a date...
How does the length of your skirt... how is that in any way relevant to whether you consented to sex with a particular man or not?
I think, quite frankly, if we're saying that a short skirt is tantamount to invitation, then we ought to be bringing the dress designers as accessories before and after the event. And we're not doing that. And therefore, quite frankly, to suggest that that's got to be taken in the cross-examination, I believe that is fallacious.
Eileen, the point that I would like to put to you is this, and it does deal with the issue of consent, and I think that this is actually central to it. If consent has been given for a sexual act, for penetration, and then consent is withdrawn, if penetration continues, it is rape.
Yeah.
Now, under those circumstances, which would be a very difficult set of circumstances for anyone to adjudicate.
It's different and it's unusual, and that's not most cases are about.
But this is the issue of date rape, and I think, as I've already said, date rape is a misnomer, but still that has to go before trial, it has to go before a court, and a judge and jury have to make a very difficult decision based on that set of circumstances. It's never easy. We all have to accept that.
Do you accept, though, that there are degrees of culpability? That somebody who, in a premeditated and violent way, rapes somebody is very different from somebody who, in a date situation, ends up penetrating without consent?
I don't think there is a difference. I don't think there's any more difference than if I poisoned your coffee and you had a nice quiet death, or I beat you to death. You're still a dead body. At the end of the day, the same crime is committed, and I feel the same about rape.
One of the other main issues is the suggestion that women sometimes give confusing sexual signals, that it isn't clear whether she has actually given consent.
consent, as I say, goes to the heart of the issue. I mean, if a woman says no, she means no. That's
Well, what if the man didn't believe that she meant no?
Well, sorry, the woman said no. Now it's a matter of them proving that. Was no said? It's also a matter of was yes or no even uttered? Was there other consent given? Were there other signals given? There's a whole lot of things which have to come into our consideration of the actual issues, and it's very difficult to do this, I think, in a general discussion. I think actually, any commission that would look at this would have to sit down and look at actual case law and how it is carried out, and whether there's been a defect in the delivery of good law and the delivery of bad law.
But the reason that's there, Mark, is to protect the man in the situation where no means yes. In other words, as Ian says, objectively you've got no. You've got no.
Are you standing here saying that...
Excuse me, Annie, excuse me, but where no can mean yes, and therefore that, having the subjective test of a man's belief then allows for a man to say, in these circumstances, yes,
no meaning yes?
Yes, indeed.
Does it ever happen? If a woman says no, does she ever mean yes?
I would not even credit that with any kind of a response. I'm just amazed that Eugene has the audacity to actually say that in public. We know what the defence barristers go around saying. I'm very, very sorry.
Louise, as a young woman, can you ever imagine a situation where a woman, perhaps because it gives her a thrill, might say no to start with, but actually means, well, keep trying, mate, you never know your luck?
Definitely not.
Never?
Never. That's one thing you just don't do.
So
no
if you say
no,
that means it forever?
Yes.
But ultimately, Mark, you know, it's 12 of our peers that decide. All of this material is placed in front of 12 human beings, and I'm sorry, Eileen, but in cases where I have seen no meaning yes, those 12 human beings have said not guilty. Now, that's just
And what happens when the jury is being picked? That the defence can challenge as many jurors as they want, and generally they end up with 12 young men the same age as the rapist. And I have seen barristers in Belfast Crown Court going over and leaning on the jury box like it's a bar and saying, well, you know what it's like, boys. You take these women out, you buy them a couple of drinks, you give them a lift home, you buy them a hamburger, and what happens? You end up in court. In other words, I have seen that.
But isn't that actually, I mean, isn't that actually a perfectly reasonable situation? That could actually happen, and that the sexual signals get confused at that point.
This is a young woman who had strangulation marks around her neck.
Case, but I'm just taking Eugene's point where the jury in the end did accept that argument. The sexual signals got confused, and as a result, the woman felt she'd been raped, and the man felt that he understood there'd been consent.
I don't believe that happens. I don't believe that the average man is as stupid as that not to know what's going on.
Just on the issue that we started with, the range of punishment available for rape, is it sufficient to cover the crime in all its manifestations?
I think we should perhaps look more closely at sentencing principles to cover each and every set of circumstances, from the most innocent, inverted commas, date rape to the most vile, violent, abusive form of rape. And perhaps where we should concentrate is on sentencing principles.
Louise, what do you make of that?
I just want every rapist to get what they deserve. That's the only thing I really want. And maybe if more of them, there mightn't be a trial there, but at least if they try them, maybe they'll get what they deserve, because when they walk away, we're the ones that have to live with it the rest of our lives, knowing that they were never convicted, and they're walking about saying they're innocent of something they didn't do.
There's a UK Law special on privacy next Sunday at the earlier time of 7.
For any details of the items covered in this week's programme, we've produced a free fact sheet. For a copy, please write to UK Law 6, P.O. Box 55, London W12 8UE, or you can ring the Channel 5 order line on 0990 55 50 55.